welcome to the Players Ball Podcast for AT Aliens by AT Aliens. I'm your host, Alex the Great. I'm with my close friend and brother, MB, and today we're bringing you some content that some we're going to label as controversial. We'll label it as controversial ourselves because everybody's so damn sensitive these days. I'm sure it will be controversial at some point or another. So we'll start by saying like, subscribe, and comment before we get into it. But don't run away. Like we're not going to talk about anything scary. Um, we are going to talk about some hot button issues that have gone on in sports as they relate to Georgia. Right. So let's kick it off, man. We're gonna jump right in with Mr. Harrison Butker, um, Georgia Tech alum. That's how we're tying in Georgia. He played
Born,
there, born
born,
and raised.
went to Westminster High School. Yeah,
His wife went to school with him as well, right? She's a topic that may come up here. My man had some. He gave a commencement speech at Benedictine College, which is a Catholic college in Kansas City, or Kansas, not Kansas City. It's in the state of Kansas, and he made some comments on some things that the media at large did not like. Um, What I will say is that I don't think the media watched the whole the whole commencement speech. It's 20 minutes long. Who has time for that? If you can just grab the 2 minute clip that's gonna make the most headlines and push that out. Like many things in our media today, it's all about the clicks, right? So you can take things without the context and completely skew them from where the original desired comment was going. I definitely think that was done. Um, I did watch the whole interview, so I'll give a brief synopsis. Right, he comes in, he talks about his faith, being a Catholic man. He talks about how the church has more or less become lukewarm. Um, Priests aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing anymore. Um, People aren't honoring their vows to God. More specifically, he starts to talk about how, silence is the new position of acceptance within religion, within Christianity, and specifically Catholicism, right? Just be quiet and you'll be okay. And he is not okay with that stance, right? And I agree with this first part. Um, Stands to believe that you should speak about your faith. People should know where you stand, and to hide it means that you're hiding God, which I agree that that's a problem as well. Let's start there. What do you think about that, Matt?
yeah. I think it's kind of funny. I don't. I can't say I'm the biggest T Swizzle fan, so I don't know the exact lyric, but I believe he chose to use one of his teammates' girlfriend's lyrics in
He did.
I don't know what it is, but something along the lines of silence is basically being complicit, for lack of a better way to put it. Um, and I do think there's a lot of truth in that. I do think being at a Catholic school, that it was a good opportunity for him to speak from a position of faith, right? He did also, just to note, a he did a commencement speech at Georgia Tech the year prior, so back in May of 2023, in
Hmm.
which he also brings up faith. But I do think because of the environment, he chose to take a more neutral facing position, right? In this most recent commencement speech, he hit on some topics such as abortion, um,
Yeah.
and things that are really kind of hot button topics in our culture. And he chose at Georgia Tech to kind of shy away from those in particular and just more and spoke more broadly. But the overall message in both commencement speeches was very similar
Mm.
in kind of trying to point out the importance of companionship and family and this traditional idea of the family. And I think that's where a lot of people kind of took issue with the way that he delivered his speech. Is that his his perspective is very old school in nature.
Yeah. Just touch on more of the specifics that he said in that first part. He was talking about how leadership, our current leadership, the leadership of the country, specifically President Biden, is an enabler who walks around touting his Catholic faith. But uh, I don't know what specifically he was talking about. But he said he refused to like make a cross um, at an abortion rally or something like that.
Mm.
Uh, but yeah, so he got into that, and then yeah, he does have some older world is I guess what we would call it, but they're still present today. I don't know if older is what I would call it actually thinking about it. He started with that, and then he did go into there was a particular part about when he started speaking directly to the female graduates at Benedictine College, where he went down the road of saying, um, I know a lot of you are looking more forward to being married and being mothers than you are to a career. And he got slaughtered for that. And I don't think that that's fair. So, having watched the whole thing, I think I have a little more context than the average Twitter user or YouTube commenter because they had it cut down. I had to scroll actually like halfway down the page to find the actual full commencement speech. Everything else was, the clips or responses to the clips. And I'm like, all right, why can't I just see the full speech? But we're still trying to figure that algorithm out ourselves.
Yeah, I'll say I tried to watch the whole speech, and the very first video that I clicked on was a news outlet. I, I don't know if I'd really call them news outlet, but they parade as one, and they took the entire time of this video to just completely tear down the Christian faith in general and this idea of neo Christian nationalism that they feel that the conservative right is really strongly pushing.
Hmm.
And I think that is
What
certain.
syndication was this?
I'll have to go back and look. I don't even. It wasn't a big name one.
Okay.
Um, or at least I don't believe it was like a CNN, Fox, NBC, ABC. Like I don't think it was any of your well-known news publications.
Hmm.
But yeah, like they took the entire time to just completely um, bash the Christian perspective and uh, took it as like this non-including misogynistic worldview, and I think that couldn't be further from the truth. That what is preached in the Bible. Now, are there people that have those perspectives? Absolutely.
Hmm.
But I think that it's wrong to group the many by the minority. And yeah, no, it's hard because I understand where some of the outrage is, and I understand the choice of of how he chose to deliver the message may not have been, you know, the most ideal, and could easily be viewed as misogynistic, but I don't think that was his goal. I think there was a much broader message that he was trying to portray. Uh, in fact, I think that message was that, you know, career and success and climbing the corporate ladder is, you know, is great. It's all fine and well, but at the end of the day, it tends to leave people empty.
Hmm.
And the most important thing that he's found is, you know, family. And he spoke specifically on the importance of um, women and their role in the traditional family.
Yeah. I'm gonna read the quote specifically. Um, I have it here. So I want to speak directly to you briefly. He's talking to the women. Because I think it is you, the women, who have the most diabolical lies told to you. How many of you are sitting here now, about to cross this stage, and are thinking about all the promotions and titles you're going to get in your career? Some of you may go on to lead successful careers in the world, but I would venture to guess that the majority of you are most excited about your marriage and the children you will bring into this world. End quote on that. So I don't necessarily see any misogyny there, and I'll tell you why. His audience, number one, he's at a Catholic college. I don't, and he got a standing ovation for the most part in the auditorium. I don't think that he was off base with his audience, right? A lot of them, though they may have gone on to, they definitely are eligible to go on to fulfilling careers and be wives and be mothers. Maybe that's not what they were there for, right? Maybe they're there as a theologians. Maybe they're, I don't know if it's a Bible college. I should have done a little more research to find out what Benedictine college is, except that it's a Catholic institution. Um, but he doesn't necessarily say that there's anything wrong with having a successful career,
And
right?
that you
He
can't
does
have all
say,
three, right?
yeah, that you can't have all three. I think he's trying to communicate what he feels are the priorities that should be um, set for women. And I think it also applies for men, right? I mean, to a certain extent, marriage and children, establishing a family, taking care of that family so that you have the people you can connect with. You talk about the loneliness. No one wants to be alone, but people will fuel their progress until they have no one else around but their job, right? What Kanye say back on that college dropout? You know what's gonna keep me warm? Those degrees. Like, no, man, you need a wife and some kids. You need family. Family causes you to strive, or at least community. If you don't want to have kids, don't have kids. You don't get married, don't get married. But have community. I think that's really important, and I think that's a part of society that we have definitely done a disservice to over the last couple of years, specifically post COVID, but generally, even before that, right? With the social media world, there's just not the need to genuinely connect with people, right? If you send somebody a Facebook comment or you comment on somebody's picture on Instagram, that is communication. I wouldn't say that that's community, right?
He spoke in his Georgia Tech commencement speech
Yeah.
specifically on that, and how post 2020, how even with technology that brings us together, many people are still finding themselves feeling lonely, depressed, with anxiety, and all these other, you know, negative mental states. And one of the things he pointed out was a quote from, I believe, Shannon Sharp, where he basically said, you know, what is success without someone to share it with?
Hmm.
And that was kind of what I was trying to illustrate earlier when I said, you know, he seemed to take more of a neutral standing. He still stood on his beliefs and his laurels, but with
Stand on business.
without without the strong Christian, overtones, right? Like he was able to give a message, a Christian method, without necessarily announcing it as a Christian method.
Or saying it's a man's job to lead, which is Christian, and I think I it is true. I agree with it. He didn't say that. He didn't come at women like that. Like you have to follow, you have to be subservient. He said, "Hey, prioritize marriage and family."
Yeah, I mean, I would be the first to admit, um, you know, my motivation in going to college and getting a degree was to be able to take care of my future family,
Mm,
uh, and finding a partner and uh, finding someone to share the rest of my life with was something that I thought about and was an important uh, part of that period in my life. Right, you're 18 to 24, 25. You're really just learning about yourself and trying to prepare yourself and what you want to do and bring to the world. And, it was a period of, growth, but also in deciding what you hold, highest in priorities. And one of my top priorities was, getting married and eventually having a family.
yeah,
So,
and I think we come from obviously we come from two different home styles, right? You coming from a married home, you coming from a single parent home. I didn't initially have that, right? When I was in college, I really was there to have a good time, and a degree was second. And then I got the degree, and I actually met Brittany while in college. So then it became a thought like, all right, well, let me make some money. I mean, I always wanted to make money, but then I wanted to make a little more so I could keep my woman. It's just interesting how we arrived from different places. We arrived at the same stance because that definitely became a press. It's my driving factor now, right? When I'm seeking promotions or when I'm seeking additional salary, it's not for praise or recognition or anything like that. It's to push my family forward. It's all about them. Everything is about them. And I think that's how Harrison Butker feels as well. Everything is about his family. Um, he want the other thing is I have it on a good authority. I've seen it. I've talked to my wife about it. Women now this is the part that the controversy may come in. Women shame other women for being things that they are not. Whether it's a career woman shaming a mom because she's so involved with her kids, or a mom shaming a career woman because she's not involved enough. There's a constant battle between um, those two positions within the female diatribe or group dichotomy. There's a dichotomy, it's split. You got the workers and you got the moms, and then you have this bubble. It's like a Venn diagram. This bubble of people who are doing both, and they're happy with doing both, and they don't have to pick a side. But for the most part, it's just what you're doing is wrong and what I'm doing is right. And either it's because I have kids or because I have a career. There isn't a thought that women can do both. And there's a lot of women who are doing both, doing it wonderfully, doing it beautifully. And I think it's tough. I mean, that part I can't really speak to specifically. I can look outside looking in. Yeah, I imagine doing both is tough. But just because you do one or the other doesn't, you shouldn't be receiving shame, especially from your counterparts for it. And homemakers, I think, are shamed. Like, oh, wow, you're just a housewife. You just raise the kids. You just cook and clean and take care of the home. Like, no, that's not cool to do. Right. That is an honorable, um, needed position. And it's not okay to shame it.
yeah, I actually think there's shame, from both sides of the aisle, right? The ones that work who aren't necessarily homemakers also feel a lot of shame. And I don't know this, from my own personal experience, but that of, my significant other, my wife, and what she's voiced to me as being one of those who is a mother and has a career and is trying to balance that, you know, being a good employee and also being there for our children and being present in their lives. And she does feel a lot of mom guilt
Mom
when
guilt. Yeah.
when she isn't able to be there. I had the opportunity this past Monday to go to Tilly's field day. Unfortunately, I did not make it to Bennett's because I had work obligations I could not
Hmm.
rearrange. But there's a lot of parents that attend those things. There are a lot of parents that attend field trips and are very involved in their children at school as well as their extracurriculars. And that's just not something that, for me growing up was really a reality. My parents were there when they were able to, but for the most part, my dad was always working. And so Sarah does feel, shame and guilt for not being able to do more because
Hmm.
she's balancing that career motherhood. And, it was a tough situation to be in, whether or not you're a stay at home parent or a working parent. I think because of that, I keep saying that old school mentality of like the husband is the provider, the wife is the mother, the stay at home, the housemaker. That kind of mentality, I think, is the root of where some of that mom guilt, some of that shame comes from.
Hmm.
And you take in, the new age viewpoints and what we see in TV and movies and social media and this and that, and the perfect Instagram lives that people live, and
Yeah.
it paints this unrealistic view of what should be everyone's reality, right?
Hmm.
Instead of focusing on what is right for you and your situation.
He said it. He called it. Harrison called it the most diabolical lies, right? But that goes to many parties. It goes to career women to say that, hey, you have a job, you're automatically a bad mother. Like that's complete bullshit, right? And on the other hand, you're talking about the moms, the stay-at-home moms. They're like, well, you don't provide anything else for your household. What are you doing with your life? Like that's trash. And I don't think we have a way out of that, right? People just had to learn who they are, and they got to know somebody bigger than themselves. Which I know someone bigger. I know you know someone bigger. Our wives know someone bigger. And when you know someone bigger than yourself, and you can rely upon that person, God is who I'm speaking of, to be clear. Uh, you can live above what the world tells you you need to do. And I mean, so the last part of of Harrison's speech, because they didn't tell you about that. He did also address the men, and he was speaking upon how iron sharpens iron. You need to surround yourself with like-minded people, people who are going to make you grow, people who are going to make you better, not just somebody that you can get lunch with, and not get just stay surface level, get deep with. And I think there's a lot of reality to that as well. A lot of truth to that is that people, especially in the social media age, are not always surrounded by people who are going to give them that real deal. Um, you want to get the likes and the clicks, and that's the goal. but sometimes you should look to be critiqued. You should look to be um, commented upon, right? In a fashion that's constructive, not just blasted, because that's not cool either. But if someone has constructive criticism for you, everyone needs somebody in their life that's going to give them constructive criticism. And I had that. I don't think enough people do. And so
Yeah.
that's one of the last points he was making there. What do
Our
you think about that?
our pastor always talks about how the church is in circles, not in rows. And
Mm,
what he's trying to illustrate is the need for community, and the importance of things like small group, where you
yeah.
have a community of individuals that are in similar uh, phases of life. You can have men's groups, you could have women's groups, you could have groups of people who are grieving, but you have people who are doing life with similar circumstances, right? That you can use to help you grow, and you can help them grow. And
Hmm.
you can use their experiences and they can use your experiences to build everyone up, right? And I think that that's one of the most powerful ideas that you can preach upon, and the need for community and the need to uplift one another and challenge one another and to help each other grow, because ultimately, you know, the future of humanity really depends on it, right? We live in a
Hmm.
culture where it's all about you know taking people down,
Beat
and
them down. They tried to
chance
get Harrison Butker fired.
yeah.
They wrote the NFL like you got to get rid of this guy. He's a top five kicker in the league. Just to circle back to sports. Um, and he made a comment. Why would that deem him unfit to work? I hate that so many people are just angry to be angry, it feels like. Right? They need something to be upset about. And now you want to see results for your anger. Like, no, if you're mad, just be mad. Right? Throw your little comment out there on Twitter, or to call for somebody's job because you disagree with his stance and what he said is ridiculous. And I think that is becoming the norm, right? They may call my job and say, "Hey, you got to fire Marcus. He said that Harrison Butker wasn't an asshole." Like, no, I don't fault the man for the things that he said. Um, Everyone is entitled to their opinion, and if you want to express it, you should be able to express it without being crucified.
And there used to be, at least in this country, a a platform or a forum where people could have these opinions and people could disagree, and instead of just trying to destroy them, like take a personal attack, attack their livelihood, attack their ability to survive, and they would take it upon themselves as a challenge to maybe
Hmm.
change their perspective through showing them you know the flaws, not taking a personal attack, right? Like
Right? It's
a
discourse.
exactly discourse instead of going straight personal.
Hmm.
And it's really kind of sad state of affairs when discourse is no longer really acceptable.
Well,
uh,
discourse lives in communities, and we both acknowledge that communities are few and far in between. Right? We need more communities so that that will enable discourse to return. Right now, it's just shots across the bow. People are not even connected to each other and just making comments off things that they see and they hear, and they're not even checking the full comments. Right? We can't get back to that unless we start to establish more communities. I think there are people that are doing that. Right? Churches are doing that. Running groups are doing that. There's ways to get it in, uh, and it's
honest,
important.
I honestly think that's why things like fandom and communities of fans that support a common cause, why they have such a stronghold in our society, because whether people want to admit it or not, they're searching for that sense of community somewhere.
Hmm.
It may be something simple as like a sports team or a musician or,
A politician.
a politician, which
Uh,
unfortunately is one of the lesser um,
More
productive,
fanatical communities.
well, and lesser productive, right? Like,
Ah, yeah, that's very true.
uh, it creates more divisiveness instead of, bringing people together. Whereas, you find people in all walks of life that enjoy the Falcons or the Hawks or the Atlanta Braves, and on Sunday or on Friday night when you're at the ballpark or whenever, like, you come together and you can support that team and you can share in their success and or their failures, right? But you're not like at each other's throats all the time. Although you do see some, discourse if you look into some of the Falcons community pages.
Oh yeah.
There have been some hot ones like the Matt Ryan debate, and but I think that's you're gonna find that in any community. But my overall point is that whether people find that in church or at a school, they're gonna find it somewhere.
Hmm.
Um, and it'd be nice if it was more in positive areas of our society instead of
Yeah.
some of the negative ones where it's just a group that comes together in the hatred of another
Yeah.
group.
Some of these Reddit groups. There's
Yeah.
communities, but yeah, they can be toxic. Yeah, man. You mentioned I can't think of the word now. You're talking about segregated, not segregated, but like versus. You didn't say black versus white. Um, Matt Ryan, Michael Vick, Caitlin Clark, Asia Wilson. Fill the people in on where we're going next.
All right, so I think it's hard to miss the the rise, I guess, the meteoric rise of Caitlin Clark
Hmm.
and what she is kind of meant for the WNBA in a very, very short career. And it has not come with all rainbows and sunshines. There
Hmm.
has been a lot of, I guess, negative energy, um, comments, uh, very high scrutiny about her and kind of what she's doing on and off the court. And some of the more surprising scrutinizing has come from some of her peers, right? It
Hmm.
started with a conversation during um, one of the, I think it was the Final Four match, Iowa versus UConn, where Diana Taurasi and Sue Bird and um, I don't know if the other one was present, but Diana Taurasi goes on to basically talk about how uh, Caitlin's in for basically a rude awakening as she transitions to the WNBA, that it's not going to be all success in the beginning. She does later in her comments state that it's going to be true for all incoming rookies. And her overall message was trying to just state that there's a transition period, just like there is going from college to the NFL or, high school to Major League Baseball, or, when you step up from one league to the next in your pursuit of uh, being a professional. And then when you finally make it to that professional league, there is a transition period. And that's what she was just trying to illustrate, was that there was going to be a period of transition. Well, her comments took a lot of heat as, kind of downing Caitlin. And they did go on to say, I believe her and Sue Bird are UConn alum. and they said they would take any of the UConn seniors over Caitlin Clark in the upcoming draft. So that was a little bit of a fiery a statement. But then recently, and I wanna read you this headline on uh, NBC. Caitlin Clark involuntarily sparks talks of race and double standards in sports. Give you another one. Um, this one is from Fox News. Caitlin Clark's problematic popularity comes from race and her sexuality. And so those
That's
headlines,
that's a that's a wild headline, bro.
right, they're very, very, as we've talked about, typical media,
Clickbaity. Yeah.
emotional, sensationalized topics, but they stem from some comments that were made by Asia Wilson, and specifically, they were comments about, you know, Caitlin Clark's popularity and her marketability. And Asia says, I think it's a huge thing. I think a lot of people may say it's not about black and white, but to me it is. It really is, because you can be top notch at what you are as a black woman, but yet maybe that's something that people don't want to see. She then added, they don't see it as marketable, so it doesn't matter how hard I work. It doesn't matter what we all do as black women. We are still going to be swept underneath the rug. And that's why it boils my blood when people say it's not about race, because it is. That specific article, the one from Fox News, goes on to talk about how there is a belief that because Caitlin Clark is white and because she is not a part of the LBGQ community,
Don't leave out the T.
LBGTQ,
You got, they're gonna
LBGTQ,
kill you.
yeah. But you know what I'm saying, that because she's not part of that community, that that makes her more likable, it makes her popularity higher and her marketability greater. What say you?
Yes, I think I don't know about the heterosexuality versus LGBTQ having a factor that because the thought is that because she's heterosexual, she's more marketable.
Well, specifically,
Plus,
I,
I know it's because she's white, right? But is that what Fox News was saying?
so the statistic that they use is that 70% of the WNBA is comprised of African American and um, homosexual
All
LGBTQ.
60% of 70% of those women are lesbians.
Yes, apparently. That's how it reads, at least. Um, let me find the exact quote. Um, okay,
I read that 70% number, but that was just about race.
all right. The LA Times wrote Clark's success draws questions of race and equity in a league comprised 70% of black players and nearly a third comprised of LGBTQ players. So 33% are LGBTQ, 70% are black. So
Hmm. Okay. All right.
is
Let me go. I can go off of that.
all right.
On the white aspect of it, is she more marketable because she's white? I think that is true. Um, there are more white people in America than there are any other race, right? There is not a huge following as I know it of the WNBA. So it's twofold. Yes, I do think that she is seen as more marketable because she is white. I lean credence to Angel Reese not getting the same publicity as Caitlin Clark, even though she is a megastar as well, right? Coming in, I think she's bigger and well known more than a lot of WNBA stars, but she's not. She's nowhere near Caitlin Clark's level, right? Caitlin Clark already has a signature shoe. She is, I think it's true. Race is a factor. She's more marketable because she's white. Um, Truth of the matter, what Asia said about black women not being just kind of being swept under the rug, the WNBA should be the least likely area for that to happen. And because it happened there, I can see her point. Now on the other side of that, business is business. And the only color most businesses care about is green. Caitlin Clark is a perfect storm, right? Eyes were on her. She is an electric player. Um, she is dope, right? And I think she's also very personable in her interviews. I like her, and I honestly wasn't paying a whole lot of attention to college basketball or women's basketball, let alone women's college basketball, because I don't watch normal college basketball. Men's normal. Oh, I don't watch men's college basketball. I watched Caitlin Clark play. I watched her games. I did not watch a lot of the finals. If it wasn't Zach Edey, and I was watching Caitlin Clark or Angel Reese or South Carolina. I watched all three of those teams. I don't really watch a whole lot of UConn games. I know they were the eventual champions. Or no, South Carolina won. But it was also a perfect storm. Did it have an impact that she's white? Yeah, but it also has an impact of the green. There's a lot of money to be made off of the phenomenon that was Caitlin Clark. But I'll read you this one statement here. Clark signed when Clark signed with Nike for 28 million and a signature shoe. She joined Brianna Stewart, Elena Deladonna, and Sabrina Ionesco, all white, in a league that's 75% black, as the only players with their own Nike kicks. Now, Asia Wilson did break that streak a week later, and Nike, they kind of look like little dookie heads to me with their little statement. You thought we'd sleep on a SEC champion, national champion, number one draft pick, five-time All-Star, Olympic gold medal winner, WNBA Finals MVP, statue having, New York Times best-selling, Times 100 most influential person in 2024, two-time WNBA champion, two-time Defensive Player of the Year, two-time WNBA MVP, and the pettiest hooper on the internet. Of course, Asia's got a shoe. Now, if she amassed all these accolades and she's just now getting a shoe, that's ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
Whereas you have Nike only had white women with signature shoes before her, and they have not amassed these accolades. They just haven't.
So, one, not really a counter, but one thing I'd like to note, and this does kind of tie this story a little bit to the state of Georgia, and we can talk more on that in a minute. But
Yeah,
Maya Moore was the first woman, period, to get a Jordan brand deal with her own Jordan brand shoe. Jordan brand doesn't bear the Nike logo, but it
right.
is an entity of Nike.
No,
It is.
it was. It's a separate entity now. In the fact that Cricket is a separate entity from AT&T, right? They're different. She's wearing Jordan. And I don't know who else that Jordan has put on the roster, but we're talking about Nike, the biggest basketball equipment proprietor in the world. They did not have a black woman with a signature shoe.
Yeah, I mean, you listed off the accolades. I agree with your assessment that it's absolutely ridiculous if she had amassed that kind of career and accolades that she wasn't instantly offered a Nike deal. Now, I will say on the other side, you look
Or
at
a
them,
Jordan deal. He's not excused of this either, right? Like, but Nike is who we're talking about. So
but you look at the men's side of things, right? And LeBron James and the fact that he was worth $90 million at the age 18, the day
Hmm.
he graduated high school because of his exclusive Nike shoe deal. So
Yeah.
I say all that to say that it may not just be about race, right? I think
It's not just about race. I will agree with that.
I will fully agree with the statement that yes, it may play a role, but it's not the sole role, right? I think you put it
100%.
I think you put it quite eloquently when talking
Thank you, sir.
about Caitlin Clark just kind of being a perfect storm because as you mentioned, Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi, who may not be white, she may be olive, but you have all of these other highly regarded historical women in that sport who still have not achieved the notoriety of Caitlin Clark that are white, right?
And it's
So
not close.
it's not close. So it's not just black NBA, WNBA players that are being quote unquote slept on under the rug. It's also the white WNBA players that have come before Caitlin Clark. So the question I've been asking myself is like, what is it about Caitlin and her game specifically that draws people in, like makes her a must see TV. I too watched women's basketball for the finals. I caught a couple in season games, specifically when Iowa and LSU faced off, because that Angel Reese, Caitlin Clark narrative that the media like to spin. Um, that just added some entertainment value, right? Made
Hmm.
me curious enough to take a watch. I've caught glimpses of her game so far this year. Never really watched or even cared at all about WNBA or women's college basketball in the past. I did, you know, keep an eye from afar on what Maya Moore was doing because she was a local to, the Nuff. And
Enough.
yeah, you know, our our old um
Alum. Yeah.
yeah, well
Well,
she
she wasn't an alum, but
she
competitor. County
right,
rival.
yes, exactly, and was pretty much our age. I think she was a year behind us in school,
Hmm.
and I had the opportunity to see her play quite a bit, you know, in tournaments and things that we traveled for the basketball team. Collins Hill was also competing at a lot of those. So, I
Yeah.
got to see her up close in person play, and she was an amazing player. She was breaking barriers really for the what was expected of what women could do in basketball. And she went on. She won 3 state championships here in Georgia. She was the Georgia Player of the Year. She was a McDonald's All American. She went on to UConn. She won like 80 some odd games straight. Was part of that big streak at UConn that broke UCLA's all time winning streak. Won 3 national championships in UConn. Was number 1 player overall. Won multiple WNBA championships, right? Like I paid attention to her from the far, but it still wasn't enough to like sit down and want to watch her games. It was more
Mm.
like check the stat line, see how she's doing, like give her some props from the side. Um, but yeah, so like it's interesting that you know even with all of those things happening historically, it's Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese and this like new age up and comers that are really starting to put a spotlight on the WNBA.
Yeah. I after hearing what you said, right? So Maya Moore did all that. She got the Jordan deal. I didn't watch a ton of Maya Moore games. I saw years ago via Miss Latober McClam. Toto always was watching WNBA games. She's a hell of a hooper herself. She still is. Last time I played with her, we won a championship in a 3-on-3 tournament, Linwood Park stand up. But and we did actually win a championship. Not that's not cap. Um, but Maya Moore, she had the accolades. She got the Jordan deal. What it was about Maya Moore, and what it was about Candace Parker, and what it was about Brittany Griner, is that they were doing things that had not historically been seen in the female game, whether that was dunking or like swaggy basketball play, right? Women are phenomenal basketball players, but it wasn't seen a lot in the NBA, at least, and I wasn't watching, so I can't speak too highly of it. The flashiness that exists in the NBA and that level of excitement, I think that is what Caitlin brings to the game. Her closest player comparison to me is Steph Curry, right? The way that she puts up shots, and you just hold your breath because you think it's going in, but it's so improbable because she shouldn't have shot it, right? But
Right.
she shoots it and she hits it more often than not. It's that level of excitement and flash that I think could be completely wrong. So there are some other ladies like Agumbawale. She hoops like that. She hoops with flash. Um, that level of excitement is good for viewership. No one wants to see a bunch of Tim Duncans play basketball. Let's just
It
call it what it is. Fundamentals are incredibly important to the game. They don't draw viewers, and that's what the WNBA was. Caitlin Clark she has good fundamentals, but she's that flash as well.
it's funny you mention that because like my personal uh stereotype, I should say, has always been, well, the WNBA NBA, it's all fundamental basketball, which is boring to watch. Which,
Hmm.
you know, I don't I don't know if that's really the truth. Like in the last 10 to 15 years, has it really been that, really boring fundamental basketball that, it might have been, in the early stages? Because players that you mentioned, Maya, Candace Parker, Diana Taurasi, Sue Bird, uh, Brianna Stewart, they've all really changed the game, um, but it wasn't really put on display for everyone, right? Like it still wasn't becoming a centerpiece, a household, um, you know, phenomenon. It was
I
still,
think the closest thing that's been to it was this last All Star weekend where Steph faced Sabrina Ionesco in the 3-point contest, and she was lighting it up. Right, she almost beat him.
well, she did
Um,
the prior year in some event.
mm, well, but in this one, all eyes were on the NBA. I think that was one of the more watched events, and she brought a lot of light to the game. She even said after the fact, after the game, right, that was the goal. She wanted to bring more light to the WNBA. They got some quality hoopers. It's not just Caitlin Clark over there, right? I can't name a bunch of them. I'll keep it a buck. Um, but I've seen some really exciting basketball in the WNBA. Like there was a time, like last year, the Dream they made the playoffs for the first time in a long time. They were like the Bills. Did you know that? Like in the sense that they went to the championship like 3 years in a row and lost every year. But they after that streak, they just were kind of trash and hadn't returned to the playoffs until last year. And they drafted a player, Ryan Howard, and she's cold. She's cold. So I don't think as much. And shout out to Tim Duncan, right? He's one of my favorite players. It's because he is so good at fundamentals that he was as successful as he did, but it just wasn't an exciting brand of basketball. Um, I think it has changed. It's changed behind the scenes because we're not big watchers. No one was, if we're being completely honest. The majorities. There's definitely some loyal WNBA fans, but the majority of people weren't watching. That's why the revenue wasn't as high as it needed to be for them to do things like charter flights and um, what's the other thing that the NBA kind of just does, and it just seems like they should have been doing that. I don't know, but it's bringing light, it's bringing money to the WNBA, and I hope at the end of the day, most people are not, yeah, are grateful for Caitlin Clark, man. She's really putting the game on the map, even though it should have deserved to be on the map in the first place. It's on her shoulders, and if she fails, who knows where the WNBA ends up, right? So we should support
Yeah.
her, even
Um.
though she's white. No,
So I, in trying to think about, what is it about her game, I too compare her to Steph Curry. I love watching Steph play, but I've said it.
love it. He
Uh,
not dunking, right?
yeah, I've said it several times in the past. When it comes to baseball, like chicks dig the long ball, right?
Hmm.
People talk about still to this day how you know there's this there's this thought that, oh, steroids ruined baseball, but in reality, those home run chases brought fans back. Like baseball was fading as a
Yeah,
audience concern, and during the 90s, during the steroid era, people started watching baseball again because chicks dig the long ball. And I think that it's a very similar thing with basketball, but three pointers, right? There's something amazing about someone who just casually pulls up from the logo and hits it like
yeah.
it's nothing. It's the home run equivalent,
Effortless.
right?
Yeah,
And that is the part of Caitlin's game that is just awe inspiring to me. Her endless
yeah.
range, and you just don't see that a lot. I mean, you see, Ionescu, who's a phenomenal 3-point shooter. She went toe to toe with Steph. There are 3-point shooters all over the league, but there aren't, at least not that have come across my news feed or my TV screen, that are just pulling up from anywhere on the court. And
Had you heard of her before the 3-point contest, Sabrina?
no,
What about Asia Wilson before the headlines? Had you heard of her?
nope.
I had heard of her.
I'll tell you the ones that I've heard of that we mentioned: Sue Bird, Diana Taurasi, Candace Parker, Maya Moore, Brittany Griner. Those are the
Uh,
names that.
that's it. Yeah,
Yep.
I think Asia Wilson I heard of because she was lit after they won the championship, and there was video going around about that. Um, I heard of Caitlin Clark because of her basketball
Mm,
skills, right?
yeah.
Um, it's just different.
I
Is
heard
it fair? Who knows? But it is reality.
I heard about Caitlin Clark from the ridiculous stat lines she kept posting in college, where she was
Yeah.
40 points.
Breaking record after record.
Yeah. So,
Tie it home, man, with like the Caitlin Clark effect is impacting us here in the city, right? So the Dream, they play in College Park, state of the art facility, but it only holds I think 18,000. The Fever coming to town, we talked about it on the last pod, right? Like, oh man, it'd be nice to get them. You're like, nah, it's sold out. And they have since moved the game to Phillips Arena or State Farm Arena, right? Because of the draw that she is. That's also because of a color, and it's the color green. People always, that's the color that matters.
I thought you
to
were
the
gonna.
rest of the world
I thought you were
because
gonna
she's
say
white.
no. I thought you were gonna say because we talked about it on the podcast because
Well, obviously that,
it
right?
was legitimately. So we
The
recorded,
next day,
last Wednesday and Thursday morning. They send out a press release that they're moving the game to State Farm.
they should go ahead and subscribe. All the Atlanta organizations that are watching us and just stand in the shadows, man. Have us on, right?
Yeah. What's
We could be
wild?
decision makers in your organization.
So my coworker, my boss, specifically, was how I knew about it. She was interested in taking her family to a dream game. I don't know what specifically has piqued her family's interest in women's basketball. I do know she has some friends that are like college coaches and that
Mm.
kids play sports. Her husband's big into Atlanta sports. Uh, so that could be a lot of the
Does he
draw.
subscribe?
I don't know. But it is also, that wanting to go see not only the dream, but also see Caitlin Clark, right? And so I found out about the ticket situation through her and also the fact that they were going to pre sale. And so the pre sale went on yesterday, I believe. And the cheapest ticket to get in the building was like 60 or $70 without fees included. So you're talking about to take a family of four to a dream basketball game, it's going to run you about $400,
Yeah.
which is wild
Yeah.
considering, how far we've come in such a short period of time. I bet they
Mhm.
couldn't give some of those tickets away last year. And now
They
they're
could.
charging premium prices to pack out the largest arena in the cities.
The Dream played at State Farm and were moved to the smaller facility because they weren't selling out the seats.
They weren't covering the overhead costs to run
Right,
the
right.
building. Yeah.
Green again. It's all about that dollar, man.
Yeah, and just to kind of come full circle, you know, her her race, her sexuality, they may come into play when thinking about marketability if a brand wants to stand behind her, but I don't think that should necessarily take away from what she's accomplishing. And you know ultimately the goal is to grow the sport, right? And
Hmm.
to inspire individuals. And I get, we've had this conversation, we talked about it with the quarterback situation in Atlanta and the fact that when you're young and you're looking up to these players, you want to see yourself, in
Hmm.
representation in those players. And from that standpoint, Caitlin Clark may not represent the majority of the league, but at the same time, she has the opportunity to take the league's places that it hasn't been before and open the door for each and every
Yeah.
young girl who wants to play. One of the problems with the NBA or WNBA has been the lack of revenue, the fact that the NBA had to subsidize it, and that
Hmm.
it's very in years past it's been very difficult for someone to make a career out of it and be
Yeah.
financially uh, well off for years to come, right? And now those barriers are being broken down. These endorsement deals, the millions of dollars in endorsements, and then if people watch the TV ad revenue will come, the merchandising will come, the ticket sales. Like it's a domino effect, but you have to get people interested. And if it's Caitlin Clark that gets people interested, then you know,
More power to her.
more power to her. Exactly.
Yeah. There was something that I saw that I thought was interesting, if not funny. It was saying that Caitlin Clark is like she's bordering 6 feet, 150 pounds. Um, and a lot of the WNBA stars are like 6'4", 6'5". You see a 6'4", 6'5" woman. It's like, oh yeah, she probably plays ball, right? Like the assumption is made about 6'5" and 6'7" men. And she's not built like that. She's smaller, and it's like, yeah, she just looks like someone's mom. It's like,
Still a little young for that, but
is that insulting? Right? Like, it was just kind of wild. That's what they got out of that, was that she looks more like the average, American Jill than NBA, WNBA players, just because of her size
yeah.
and her race. Um, but hey, more power to the WNBA, man. I don't know if I'm paying $400 to get in there to see her. Um, I had to go by myself, or maybe me and Charlotte. Me and Charlotte will go. I call her my niece. She's not my niece by blood, but I love Little London. She has aspirations. Just talking to the point you were making about seeing yourself in somewhere you want to be. She has aspirations of playing basketball at LSU,
Mm.
right? She didn't even mention the WNBA. She wanted to go to LSU where Angel Reese was playing, right? So that is a an aspect that we always need to pay attention to. Representation is important.
And I do think some of that kind of takes care of itself naturally, right? You
Yeah.
know, there were players that came before, you know, Larry Bird, um, Jerry West to be one of them. He's the NBA logo, right? That,
Hmm.
you know, now since retirement later in his career has grown more and more notoriety. There were players before Michael. Michael changed the game, right? Like Larry Bird changed the game. Michael changed the game. LeBron changed the game. Joker is changing the game, right? Like there are different cycles that I think that representation naturally takes care of itself, right?
And this is a new one for the WNBA. There's a comparison made in another article that I read that says Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese are what Larry Bird and Magic Johnson were to the NBA when they came out, right? That salt and pepper duo, um, that competitiveness breeds viewership.
Yeah,
People want to see it.
I think it was you reading the response from Caitlin Clark,
Mm.
in response to some of the criticism where she specifically mentions the need for parity in order to really drive the growth in the sport. And to your point, like if you have this clash, I mean, it's honestly, it's what drew me into checking out the college basketball was Angel Reese versus Caitlin Clark, right? Like
Hmm.
you need that parity. You need the excellence on both sides of the court, duking it out, creating, all-time moments that people talk about that spread the word, that spread the desire to want to go see it,
Hmm.
right? It's funny. It was during one of the like the rain delays recently with the Braves that I caught a glimpse of a story about Mississippi State baseball. And like I've never been a college baseball fan. I've been a baseball fan, but never been a college baseball fan. But they were talking
Yeah.
about back in the glory days, like the stuff wasn't necessarily on TV, and especially college baseball, right? And it was the word of mouth that people were hearing about what Rafael Palmeiro and Will Clark were doing for the Mississippi State Bulldogs, that people just had to see it for themselves. And
Mm.
I think that's the same effect you want to have here in this opportunity with Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese and some of these up and comers. Because as far as I know, the college hoops uh, lineup is still stacked with straight ballers. So I think it's going to be an interesting
About the women.
period. Yeah. And I think
Yeah,
it's going
Juju
to,
Watkins and I can't think of that. I don't think she's at LSU anymore, but they had a guard that was really
the
good.
Haley Van Lith.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so like there's all these names that are becoming more household names that people are watching, these up and comers. I think it's a great opportunity. It's potentially going to be the spark that booms the WNBA into, you know, an actual brand, like a household brand. Let's just hope they don't fumble the bag.
Let's hope they don't fumble the bag. There's a golden opportunity. It will not come around again, I don't believe.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, sure it will. As soon as there's another hooper of that caliber, right?
yeah,
But right now is you got to strike while the iron is hot. The iron is super hot right now. You got to strike. We're gonna talk about the dream and future pods, man. You know,
yep.
because ain't no Hawks to talk about. They may become my new favorite Atlanta basketball team, depending on what the general manager of the Hawks does.
Yeah. Well, with that, I think we should wrap it up. I think we've gone well over our 60-minute target, as we tend to do on this podcast. But
Hmm.
it's always a good discussion. I think it's good to just like talk about this stuff. You know, like we mentioned in the Harrison Butker stuff, talking about things that are controversial or uncomfortable. They don't have to be a point of like conflict, right? Like they can be
Right.
a point of discussion and understanding. And I think that it's important to have these kinds of chats. And you know, they may be Atlanta tangent, but you know, it's still relevant to the future of, you know, sports in our state, right? You talk about the dream and the impact it can have on them. You know, maybe getting to move back over to State Farm in the near future. You know, who knows? But
Yeah.
yeah, man, it's been
Well,
real.
to continue discourse, my brother. I'll see you
Yeah.
on the flip. Like, subscribe, follow. Um, Asia Wilson, Caitlin Clark, Rihanna, Beyonce, Taylor Swift. We'll
Hit
catch you on the flip.
hit that notification bell and leave some comments. Let us know what your thoughts are. Is
Watch
Harrison
some
Butker?
ladies hoops.
Yeah. Is Harrison Butker a misogynist? Let
There you
us
go.
know.
Yeah.
All right, man.
All right, I'll let you.
Peace.